In the month or so leading up to Mr. O'Keefe's death, the relationship soured. That the defendant Karen Reed is guilty of murder in the second degree, striking the victim Mr. O'Keefe with a car.
You will learn that there are other major problems with the Commonwealth's theory. You'll learn that when John O'Keefe was found, he did not look like he had been hit by a car. You'll learn that he looked to have been attacked and beaten up.
It's the infamous Karen Reed story. There's a lot at stake in this murder case, which has been followed quite closely by many people. And now we have the actual trial. We're going to break down what you may have missed in week one, and there are some big developments. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey, everybody, this is a Law&Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge. Oh, yeah. And Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is helping users file for compensation due to Google misleading the privacy of their incognito browser. So if you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions. Just go to incognitoclaims.com/sidebar. What a trial we have for you. And I tell you right now, on the outset, I'm split. I am. I have no idea what happened here. If I was sitting on this jury, I would be listening to the prosecution. I would be listening to the defense. I would be so undecided at this point, which, by the way, jurors are supposed to be. They really shouldn't come up with a decision at this point. But let's take a step back. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to break it down. So this is the trial out of Massachusetts for 44-year-old Karen Reed, a former financial analyst and instructor at Bentley University. She has been charged with killing her Boston police officer boyfriend, 46-year-old John O'Keefe, back on January 29th, 2022. He was a 16-year veteran of the force, had been in a relationship with Reed for about 2 years, was actually taking care of his orphaned niece and nephew, a guy who is just overall beloved by so many. Well, prosecutors allege that she ran him over with her SUV after a night out on the town, left him to die on the ground in a snowstorm. Really, really savage killing here, right? Well, interestingly, this actually happened outside of the home of a man named Brian Albert, a fellow Boston police detective sergeant. Reed claims that she dropped O'Keefe off to go inside Albert's home for a party, and she went home only to find him dead outside hours later at around 6 a.m. She has been charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter while driving intoxicated and leaving the scene of a collision. She faces potentially life in prison. The defense has a much different version of events. They say this is all a cover-up, that Reed is being set up, that in fact O'Keefe's injuries are more consistent with him being beaten and left to die out in the cold, that Reed never hit him with her car. In fact, she is quite the base of supporters. Just check out what's happening outside the courthouse. Signs like Free Karen Reed. She is built up quite the support as this case has progressed. People believe that she is entirely innocent, that she is being set up, and we will get to that. Because what we have here are two radically different narratives. And with that, let's talk about week one of this trial. And you know where I'm going to start with week one. Opening statements from the prosecution and defense. Each side's attempt to preview for the jury what to expect in this case. And we're going to start with the Commonwealth. Here is prosecutor Adam Lally.
Is that the defendant Karen Reed is guilty of murder in the second degree, striking the victim Mr. O'Keefe with her car, knocking him back onto the ground, striking his head on the ground, causing the bleeding in his brain, swelling, and then leaving him there for several hours in a blizzard, with temperatures in the teens, wind swirling around, snow piling up on his body until she comes with Mrs. McCabe and Mrs. Roberts just after 6 a.m. And that she is also guilty of vehicular manslaughter, operating under the influence of liquor, and that she is also guilty of leaving the scene.
Then Lally focuses in on some physical evidence, like a broken taillight on Reed's car, glass, hair, all showing or attempting to show that she hit O'Keefe with her car. And by the way, there's a mention of the Waterfall. That's a restaurant, bar, and grill that apparently O'Keefe and Reed and others were hanging out at earlier on in the night.
From these different pieces, it's hard to also locates a cocktail glass that's located on the bumper or the rear area of that scene, and she locates a human hair on the back of that defendant's vehicle as well. Now, the cocktail glass on the bumper, you'll also see surveillance video from the waterfall, and Mr. O'Keefe is observed on that surveillance video essentially walking out of the waterfall with a cocktail glass in his right hand. Same right hand that has minor injuries to it, and the same right hand that's attached to his right arm that has the abrasions and lacerations. You'll hear testimony from another analyst, Christina Hanley, about the forensic consistency between a drinking glass that was in the defendant's bumper and the drinking glass pieces that were found on scene at 34 Fairview. You'll hear her testimony in regard to pieces of red and clear plastic that were microscopic in size that were found within Mr. O'Keefe's clothing. Consistent, in her opinion, I anticipate she'll testify, with the same pieces of plastic contained within the defendant's taillight. You'll hear from an Ashley Valley, who works for the lab as well, and how she fit the various pieces of broken taillight from the scene together and over that taillight housing, finding them to be consistent with each other as well. You'll hear testimony from Andre Porto, who's the essentially DNA analyst for the lab, and samples that were DNA samples that were taken from the taillight, from the clothes of Mr. O'Keefe, and the broken drinking glass that were consistent with Mr. O'Keefe. You'll also hear from this test chart from that Bodie Laboratories in regard to some mitochondrial DNA that she examined in regard to that hair that Ms. Hartnett found on the bumper of the car, in her opinion that it was consistent with that of Mr. O'Keefe as well.
But it's not just forensics that prosecutors are saying ties Karen Read to the killing of John O'Keefe. No, they are also pointing to the alleged actions and words of Karen Read.
From all of those people within that house that evening, none of them at any point in time observed John O'Keefe come into the house. They see the vehicle out front, they see the vehicle pull away, and they just assume that they left and that no one was coming. Now, you'll hear testimony from Denise as well, that about 4:30 in the morning or so, the defendant came into her room in a frantic state, saying that Mr. O'Keefe had not come home the night before. So initially, when the defendant is talking to Ms. McCabe, she indicates to Ms. McCabe that the last time she saw Mr. O'Keefe was at the waterfall. But she's driving around in that morning. She's calling a number of different people, friends of Mr. O'Keefe. She's calling Mr. O'Keefe himself. She also calls Ms. Roberts. So Kelly Roberts receives a call about 5 a.m. from the defendant indicating that Mr. O'Keefe did not come home, indicating that he got hit by a plow or that he must be dead. So eventually the defendant comes to Ms. McCabe's home. The defendant then shows both Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe the damage to her right rear taillight, which is essentially missing a number of different pieces from that right rear taillight. They then proceed off to drive and see if they can locate Mr. O'Keefe. The defendant is insistent that they go to that residence on Fairview Road. The defendant is the only one who sees Mr. O'Keefe. He yells and screams at Ms. Roberts to stop the vehicle. Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe, I anticipate, will testify that they did not see Mr. O'Keefe, not only as they were driving past him, but even after they got out of the vehicle, until the defendant gets out of the back seat and makes a beeline essentially right over to where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found.
Few things to take away from there, right? Prosecution asserting O'Keefe never came into that home, where, as the defense suggests, he did go into the home and he was beat up. It's suspicious that Read knows exactly where O'Keefe's body is, and she makes a number of strange comments, which we're going to get into more. And here's the motive, by the way. Karen Read and John O'Keefe, according to the prosecution, were in a tumultuous relationship. There were accusations of infidelity, cheating. There were problems. There was arguing, that they had a drunken fight, and she killed him with the car. But now, let's talk about the defense. Here is Read's attorney, David Yannetti, and he did not pull any punches.
Karen Read was framed. Her car never struck John O'Keefe. She did not cause his death. And that means that somebody else did. You will learn that it was no accident that John O'Keefe was found dead on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road in Canton on January 29th of 2022. You will learn that at that address lived a well-known and well-connected law enforcement family in Canton, the Alberts. Because the Alberts were involved, and because they had close connections to the investigators in this case, Karen Reed was framed for a murder she did not commit.
Now, I know what you were thinking. A cover-up. That's crazy, right? The Alberts, this powerful police family, are responsible for killing John O'Keefe. That seems pretty far-fetched, Jesse, right? I know you're saying that. Well, according to the defense, isn't it strange that Mr. O'Keefe's body was apparently or allegedly in full view and right below Brian Albert's window? Is it strange that according to the defense that Albert was a trained first responder and when notified O'Keefe was on his front lawn, he did nothing to help him, provide assistance? Or that as EMTs, firefighters, police are out on the property, Albert doesn't leave the house? And then you need to hear about Michael Proctor, the lead investigator in this case, because I will tell you, I had been following the Karen Reed story a little bit here and there. I was blown away by what I heard regarding the lead investigator, Michael Proctor.
Michael Proctor predetermined the outcome of this case. Never stepped foot inside the Albert home on January 29th, 2022. Never checked out whether there were any signs of struggle inside that home. He never called for crime scene technicians and other specialists to look for blood or other trace evidence within the home. He never asked Brian Albert for permission to go in the home and take a look around. Michael Proctor never applied for a search warrant to go in that home. Instead, he focused immediately and exclusively on Karen Reed, the outsider. Well, you will learn that on the very day that John O'Keefe was found dead on Brian Albert's lawn, Michael Proctor was texting with his high school buddies about this supposedly secret investigation using his personal cell phone. He was revealing information about this investigation to his friends, assuming that nobody would ever find out what he was doing and what he was saying. And he was revealing his true thoughts about Karen Reed to his friends, not what he put in his sanitized police reports, his true feelings to his friends whom he trusted, and in text messages that he never thought would come into the hands of the defense in this case. Called Karen Reed names you would reserve only for your worst enemies. He told his friends that he hoped that she would kill herself. He told his friends that he had seized her cell phone. And you will learn that he knew he shouldn't have been accessing any content on her cell phone because he knew there would likely be attorney-client communications on between Karen and me at that time. He knew that he was supposed to wait for a search warrant or other permission from a judge in order to go through that phone. But you'll learn that he went through the phone anyway, without permission. And you'll know that he did because he told his high school buddies that he was searching her phone for nude photos of Karen Reed. And he was disappointed he hadn't found any yet. That is the professional and unbiased investigator who was chosen to lead the investigation into the death of John O'Keefe.
Wow. Now, to be clear, yes, these are allegations. But if the defense can show that, to me, I've already made comparisons that this seems like the Mark Furman of this case, like the OJ detective. You talk about a potentially compromised and tainted investigation, and we know there is a federal probe going on into this case as well. How it was handled. Could this be why? Well, Yannetti also accuses Proctor of falsifying details in a search warrant of the SUV and seems to suggest that pieces of that taillight from Reed's SUV were planted at the crime scene, again, to frame Karen Reed. Yes, seems far-fetched, but the more you drill down on it and you hear about, these are not even lapses in the investigation, it's something more. I'm curious to know. It's a big accusation, yes, but I'm all ears. I think it's incredibly fascinating and seeing how this will be explored. And by the way, try to be disproved by the prosecution. They say this is all ridiculous. So I'll tell you at the very least, it will make the cross-examination of Mr. Proctor very interesting, to say the least, and when the defense has an opportunity to question him, if he's called as a witness. But let me highlight one more controversial piece of evidence surrounding a key witness in this case, Jennifer McCabe. This is the sister-in-law of Brian Albert. Listen to what the defense says she searched on her phone and when she searched it.
Karen didn't know that Brian Albert's sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, left the after-hours party at Brian Albert's house sometime after Karen pulled away. She didn't know that after Jennifer McCabe dropped off some people elsewhere, she returned to her own home. Karen didn't know that Jennifer McCabe climbed some stairs in her home and eventually made it into her bedroom with her cell phone. Karen didn't know that Jennifer McCabe settled in at 2:27 in the morning on January 29th of 2022 and typed a Google search that she would later delete. 2:27 in the morning was over 3 hours before John O'Keefe's body was found on Brian Albert's lawn. 2:27 was over 3 hours before anyone knew or suspected that John O'Keefe was missing or hurt or in trouble. And at 2:27 in the morning, you will learn that with no one watching her, thinking she was alone with her thoughts, not worrying that anyone would know what she was doing, Jennifer McCabe typed in the following Google search: how long to die in the cold?
Now, the prosecution will dispute the timing of that exact search. They will say that she searched that after the discovery of John O'Keefe's body. But you get why that would be such a big bombshell and help to prove this was a cover-up. And the defense's suggestion that O'Keefe's injuries were not consistent with him being hit with a car, but something else, saying that he had been beaten, even saying that some of the markings could be from a dog. So this is what we're hearing, two completely different narratives. Now, let's move on to witnesses. And one of the first witnesses we heard from was Erin O'Keefe. This is John O'Keefe's sister-in-law. She's married to his brother, Paul. And she testifies about a few things. She testifies about the infamous Aruba trip the month before John's death. This is a trip that was attended by John and Karen Reed and family members. And she also testifies about what Reed allegedly said to her after John was found dead in January.
I had texted her on New Year's Eve to see where they were.
And what, if anything, did she reply? Did she reply in text?
She did. It wasn't until later in the evening that she had caught Johnny kissing Laura's sister in the lobby of the hotel.
And what, if anything, further did she indicate to you in regard to that?
Just that they got into an argument about it.
What, if anything else, did the defendant say to you as far as...
She told me that she had to remember the bad times, which struck me as an odd comment to say, but I assumed since she was at the hospital that maybe she was medicated. But it just struck me as something odd.
Now, in addition to the having to remember the bad times, what, if anything else, did she say to you at that point during that phone call?
She said, "I don't think I'm ever going to see you guys again." And I said, "Of course you will. We're friends."
Now, following that conversation that day, did you ever speak with the defendant, Karen Reed, again?
No.
Prosecution establishing she had the motive to kill, jealousy, problems in the relationship, and that odd comment, very odd comment to make, almost as if Karen Reed is justifying why she killed him. But again, this is an allegation. This is one way of looking at it. She may have been medicated. Maybe she wasn't in her right frame of mind. The other statement about not seeing them again could also be potentially problematic, could possibly be shown as consciousness of guilt. You know you killed him, so you know you won't see his family again. Again, why, if you were innocent, why would you say that? That's an argument that you could put forward by the prosecution. Now let's move on to Officer Stephen Sarif from the Canton Police Department, who arrived at the scene where John O'Keefe's body was found. He says when he arrived, Reed appeared to be performing CPR on O'Keefe, and then she allegedly made a comment.
What, if any, observations did you make of Ms. Reed and what she was doing or saying at that point?
Ms. Reed was visibly upset. She kept saying, this is all my fault. This is my fault. I did this. And she was very hysterical.
And
She kept asking, he's dead. Is he dead? Is he dead?
and with that specific phraseology, that's something that she kept saying?
Yes.
And by your repetitive nature, I'm assuming it was said something that she said more than once, correct?
Several times, correct.
And when she's saying this, can you describe sort of how she's saying this? I mean, is it a whisper, is it a scream, or is it something in between?
She was yelling pretty good.
And with regard to her repetitive question as far as is he dead, what, if any, response did you provide to her in regard to that?
I just said they're doing the best that they can.
Suspicious words there. She was hysterical, but why is it her fault? Why I did this? Something to think about. By the way, let's see how Sarah faced under questioning from Reed's attorney.
When you made contact with the victim and the women that you described yesterday, did you see any evidence that any of the women had been engaged in life-saving measures?
Yes.
What did you see?
It appeared that Karen Reed was doing mouth-to-mouth on John O'Keefe.
You saw, I don't want to get too graphic, but you saw blood on her face?
Yes, I did.
Did you see Jennifer McCabe ever engage with John O'Keefe as he lay on the ground and assist in any life-saving measures? Did you witness that?
I don't recall.
But you do recall my client engaged.
Yes.
Isn't it true that Jennifer McCabe pulled you aside while my client and Kerry Roberts stayed with John O'Keefe and began engaging you in a conversation?
Yes.
And she was providing some sort of a narrative to you, correct?
Correct.
While the other two women are trying to save John O'Keefe's life, she's talking to you.
For brief seconds, I would say.
For brief seconds?
Yes.
You wrote in that report, quote, Karen Reed kept screaming, "Is he dead? Is he dead?" She was severely distraught and not able to tell me what happened. Correct?
That's correct.
May I approach?
Yes.
There was no limit to the amount of words that you could put on the page, correct?
No.
And the only statement you attribute to my client on that morning, just hours after the incident or minutes after the incident, was she kept repeating, "Is he dead?" Correct?
Yes.
You changed your story, didn't you?
No.
Again, putting that suspicion back on Jennifer McCabe, really talking about this tainted, incomplete, suspicious, if you want to use a word, suspicious investigation, and tunnel vision to go after Karen Reed, not look at anybody else, not see who the real killer could be. That's what the defense is articulating there. That's their moves. Now, moving forward, talking about questionable statements allegedly made by Karen Reed, that moves us to the testimony of Timothy Nuttall, a Canton paramedic. Listen to what he says Reed, who he didn't know at the time, allegedly said.
Did anybody see anything? What happened? And there was one individual that replied several times, "I hit him. I hit him."
And did you know that individual at that time?
I did not.
Can you describe the individual that said that?
I would describe her as mid-40s, average build, average height. And the other two, very similar.
And with reference to that statement of "I hit him," is that something that she said once or more than once or something?
It was several times.
And as far as the tone or demeanor, how loudly was this being said?
As previously stated, they seemed to be erratic. There was a lot going on in that scene. It did seem to be said over and over and at varying volumes.
I hit him. I hit him. Again, on its surface, that doesn't look great for Karen Reed. And we'll talk more about what an explanation for that could be. I want to tell you a quick sidebar about this, though. You might see this a lot. You might be saying, how do some of these statements get in? I mean, isn't that hearsay? It's an out-of-court statement. It's being used to prove that she hit him, used to prove the truth of the matter asserted. I don't love talking about hearsay because it can get kind of technical and in the weeds. One thing just to remember, sometimes statements can come in under a number of exceptions. One of the exceptions is something called excited utterance. It's if a statement is made in the stress of an event, it makes it more trustworthy because that person wouldn't have time to make it up. Here, I do wonder if, still under the stress of finding him. But again, there's also other statements, like a statement made against a party opponent. But just a quick primer there, how some of these statements can come in and what they're being used for. But I hit him, obviously problematic for the defense. Well, let's see what happened under cross-examination.
You claim to have heard this statement, I hit him,
Yes.
several times from the woman with blood on her face.
Correct.
You indicated that she was erratic,
Correct.
hysterical.
Correct.
You said, for lack of a better term, running around in circles.
Yes.
When you went to the hospital with the patient, did you ever inform any of the doctors or nurses or medical professionals at the hospital that you had heard a female claim to have hit John O'Keefe, and that's the reason for his injuries?
I did not give the report to the hospital.
So the answer to that is no,
No.
you did not. As a first responder and a medical professional yourself, obviously you know that the cause and manner of a victim's injuries are incredibly important as it pertains to assessing how to treat that patient.
Correct.
The way I take that is she was excited. She was in a very emotional state. Don't take seriously what she's saying. And by the way, if it was so important, how come you didn't report it? If she allegedly said this, and this is a huge piece of evidence, how come you didn't say it? And by the way, he wasn't the only one who heard this. We heard from Lieutenant Anthony Flamati from the Canton Fire Department too.
So the only response that I was personally given was just, I hit him. Oh my God, I hit him.
And when she's saying, I hit him, oh my God, I hit him, how loudly is she saying that?
So she was within 2 feet of me, but very loud.
But once again, on cross-examination by the defense, there was this.
Your job as a lead paramedic is to be as detailed as possible, correct?
Correct.
You want to provide and impart the most detail you possibly can about an incident to assist in medical intervention, correct?
Correct.
Take a look at page 3 of 5 of your report.
Yes,
You see that narrative area?
I do.
Can you point to that portion of your report where you indicate that my client said the words, I hit him?
It doesn't say that.
Can you point to your report, the portion of your report, where you indicate that you told the doctors and nurses that she said, I hit him?
It doesn't say that.
Can you point to that portion of your report where you indicate that your concern for the patient was that he had been hit by a car?
It doesn't say that.
So there you have it. Pretty good summation of week 1. There's obviously going to be a lot more evidence for the jury to consider, such as an apparent voicemail that Karen Reed left John O'Keefe saying, John, I hate you. We shall see where this goes. That's all we have for you here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.